Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to use stencils to make a cool design on your card. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. On the screen, I have a list of items that I'm using for my project, but here's really what you need for this. You need some foil, you need cardstock, and you need transfer gel. The final piece is a stencil, and here's one that I created in last week's video using a cutting machine. So I'll link to that below. You can use any stencil you have on hand. What I like about that video is it really shows you the capability. If you have a Cricut or a Silhouette or a Brother ScanNCut, you can make your own stencils using designs that are in their library or in your library. So what I'm doing here is I took a yellow piece of cardstock, and what you're going to see as I go through this video, you're going to see different stencils that I use. So I'm going to show you on this one just step by step what I do to apply the transfer gel. And then I will show you the different stencils I use. And then at the end of this, when we're turning them into foiled backgrounds, I'll show you what it looked like when the card was finished and tell you how I did that. So when I lay down the stencils, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. You want to attach the stencil using some sort of removable tape. It had been a while since I had done this, so I really forgot. This was not the best way to attach the stencil. You'll see in the other ones I'm going to do, I actually attach the paper to the stencil. The stencil just kind of fit. It was maybe a 6x6 or just a little less than a 6x6. Those tend to cover more of the paper. I actually think this one was probably closer to 5 inches or so. And so you'll see when I'm peeling off the tape, it winds up sticking a little bit to the cardstock, but no problem. It didn't affect what I needed it to do. I'm applying a thin coat of this transfer gel. I think any sort of spatula you have will work. Keep it thin, but make sure everything's covered. The other thing is to ensure that the stencil is flat against the piece of paper. So you don't want any pockets of air where the gel can get underneath it and not make a clean impression. And when you peel away the stencil, you want to avoid touching the gel area, and you want to peel it back away from it. That way you just make a clean cut. And a tip that I've heard from others that really worked for me is I have a water bin so I could put the stencils right into it, because this transfer gel will stick to things you don't want it to stick to. So make sure you've got a surface that you can wipe it away immediately. And if you're going to be doing more than one stencil, you want to make sure that it gets into water so you can clean it later. Now here's a stencil that is not one that I actually cut out, is one I purchased. And it's little martini glasses. And so I'm going to use this as one of my backgrounds. And you'll see that I'm attaching it on the front here to the mat. And then I'm going to flip it over, because then it comes back to me, hey, you need to really attach the paper to the stencil. It doesn't need to be attached to the mat, so you can move it around. The key is just to attach it so the stencil and the paper have contact through the whole process of you applying this until you peel it off. So it didn't need both. It only really needed that tape on the back. And by the time I hit the next one, you'll see that I do that. So just a note to yourself, you don't need to attach it to the mat. It's okay if the whole stencil moves around as long as the paper's with it. Again, you want to apply a nice thin coverage of the transfer gel. And what this is going to do, and you'll see this, we're going to let, after I complete the cards, we're going to let this dry. It probably, and it might depend on the weather, but it probably took me this day, it was in the 60s, and it probably took me about 3 hours where I let it dry. Some did a faster dry than others, and I think it just depends on how thick the stencil is and how thick the gel had gotten attached. So a couple of them probably dried within maybe an hour and a half, and others took about the 3 hours. Sometimes I've done this at night where they just dry overnight and I pick them up. So it doesn't matter how long you let this sit, it will still work. So you can come back to it the next day. You can come back to it in 5 hours, just as long as they're dry. That's all you need. So this is my next one. This stencil I did actually do on the video I referenced previously, and same process. You really just want to make sure it's a thin layer. The stencils I made are sometimes a little thinner than the ones that are laser cut that you may purchase, but they still work. So the key is just making sure that they're laying flat on the paper, that you have a good cardstock, and that you just remove any additional gel, but that you've got it all covered too at the same time. So pretty easy to do. And I've got one more card I'm going to show you, and then we're going to get into the process of what we do next. So this one I thought was really cute. It's a bunch of little daisies. I encourage you, I'll include links below if I can find some of the stencils, but I really encourage you to use what you have on stock. I bet you have stencils. If not, if you don't want to make them, you can find some pretty inexpensive ones. There aren't a ton of them, but I've seen them at Michael's, and this might be one that I actually picked up from Michael's. Okay, so here's the next step. Everything is dried. Fast forward those 3 hours. I've got a laminator, which is what you're going to need. Again, a lot of people have these at home. If not, there are some pretty inexpensive ones on Amazon that you could pick up for like $25-$30. So I think that this process for me is pretty cool because when you see the foil adhere to it using some heat, it just, to me, looks gorgeous. So this is just, it's hard to see. It's the dried gel, and that's what's going to look like. It's going to dry clear. So you can see on some of them I did off camera that were on clear cardstock. Some I did on colored cardstock. I'm going to use kind of more of a tone on tone for those colored ones. So if there's like that mango color, I'm going to pair it up with some foil that I had. So I've let my laminator heat up for about 10 to 15 minutes. You want it nice and hot. I've got some wax paper, some parchment paper actually is what I'm using from the kitchen. And I have a shim that is just a thicker cardstock. And this is what we're going to use to put the card through the laminator just to protect it. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take your cardstock and you're going to choose some foil. And I use different foils, and I'll include those below. Again, I try to go for this tone on tone look. So this first one I'm doing is the purple cardstock. It was the one with the little flowers on it. And I'm going to use a purple foil that I have. And you're going to cut it out to just a little bit larger than the size of the paper. You want to be careful. So if you worked with foil or if you haven't worked with foil, you should know that you can scratch it. So you want to be careful when you're cutting it with your scissors. I just lay the cardstock over it. You're not going to hurt anything by doing that, and just cut around it. You don't want to cut too much. You want to be able to save this foil and use it for other things. So once you get that cut out, you're just going to sandwich it with the blank part of the cardstock facing down. Facing up is the gel, overlaid by the foil, and the foil that has the silver facing the gel. You're going to sandwich it. You're going to put it through your laminator, and I do it twice for good measures. So again, keys to make this work is make sure your laminator is heated 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to have to play with it. Every laminator is probably very different, but I run it through twice. And then when it comes out, it's pretty cool right away. And you peel this back and you're going to see the foil has perfectly adhered to the gel. It's amazing. It's awesome. And I don't know if you can tell there, but there's no missing spots. It's perfect. And then this extra piece, you can keep it because you can use this if you have, well, and I'll hit it in another video sometime, but if you have toner paper, you can get that to stick in the areas where there's still foil to the toner paper. So it's pretty cool. This is the final card. So I added some flowers I had done in a previous video with the ScanNCut, and it's hard to tell here, but there is some gloss that I had used around the butterfly and the front flower in the center area. I added some little gems and just tried to keep it pretty simple. So this is on a gray cardstock. So this next one is the martini glass. It was on a white cardstock, and I'm using this beautiful mango paper that creates almost like a gold rose color, but it is mango and it's beautiful. Again, I'm going to keep this. We can use this in another card coming up in a future video. And this is the final version of it. I wound up putting on a bright pink cardstock with more of a copper cardstock underneath it, and I offset, I don't know if you can tell here, but I offset the white cardstock to make it unique. And then in the center I added another cardstock that I could put the sediment on. I wanted to keep it light and fun, and I actually used some glossy accents on that glass. Again, it may not be showing up on the screen, so I wanted. This next one was that mango orange paper, and I again used the same foil on it just for a tone on tone look, and it's so beautiful. And what I wind up doing with this card, again from a previous video, I had some cutouts of flowers, so I thought it'd be beautiful to kind of use that theme. I colored in the flowers with some Copic markers, and I added a sentiment that was embossed in this beautiful orange color that I had, thinking of you. I wanted that to be kind of the center of the card. I put it on gray cardstock, and I added a few Nuvo drops there. You can see them to really match, I thought, the glass that the flowers are in. So pretty simple again, really letting the foil be the center stage. So this next one is the green cardstock that I had made the stencil and overlaid it on here, added some green foil. So again, that tone on tone look. And you can see there's a couple of little spots where I probably did not lay down the stencil flat enough, which I mentioned is very key, but no problem. I just put a sediment over it, and I used again some cutouts that I had previously had and put a little butterfly on it. I added the Nuvo clear gloss on here for the flowers and the butterfly, just to give it, in person you can see it, a more shiny look, just add a little dimension. This was on craft cardstock, so pretty simple. This one you did not see me do on the video, but I wanted to show, I mean, you can use so many different versions of stencils, and this one I just thought was beautiful. I have this rainbow color paper. At the time I did this, I did not have a card made for it, so I don't have a card, but in this one too, I thought was a really cool design. I actually made a card in a version of this that was pink, but this was a blue cardstock with silver foil over it. So wanted to share those with you and those ideas. Let me know if you've done this before or what you think of this. I encourage you, if you like foil, to try this. The transfer gel is just, I like it because it's easy. You could see how quickly I could get through and do mass production of these. And that way I could really just focus on making the card, but it just creates this beautiful background. And here's a couple of other cards that I made. This one, again, using that same stencil, but it was a pink background with pink foil, and I just made this into a birthday card. So pretty easy to do. And then this next one, I actually wind up taking bits and pieces. When you trim down the cards, you're kind of left with these extra pieces, and I thought it'd be fun to combine them in a card. So that's what I did here, added a flower and sediment on it. So it's just 3 strips that were left over from other cards. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you're interested in future videos, make sure you subscribe and hit the alert button. Thank you so much for joining today. Have a wonderful day.